Well, when buying silver, it's always nice to get a good price, isn't it? You want the best price possible. But if that best price came with some caveats of legal issues for having bought stolen goods, or that the goods hadn't been imported correctly and you might be deemed part of the conspiracy to commit VAT fraud, that's not good. So, what can you do to keep yourself safe when buying silver from third parties? Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and a very warm welcome to you all joining me for another Precious Metal Ramble. And today we shall ramble on about keeping safe when buying second-hand silver and gold. The third-party network, peer-to-peer, whatever you want to call it, can be an incredibly valuable resource to buy silver at a great price, certainly undercutting those major dealers quite significantly. However, it can also come with risks. Of course, buying from some randomer on the internet carries its own risks. But beyond that, there could be issues about the items not being declared properly from import, or they could be stolen goods, or just generally not particularly genuine, and there are issues around that as well. So I'm going to share some of my top hints, tips and tricks for keeping safe when buying stuff like this, which is the second-hand market silver and gold. And that can cover brand new stuff as well. It doesn't have to just be older pieces of silver. Brand new tubes of Britannia's being offered by people who perhaps have done something a bit dodgy. Alarm bells start to ring. So we're going to dive into that in just a moment. I hope you'll enjoy this video. I think it's a really important one and a good one. But before we dive in, I just want to give a little plug to these Mint era Britannias. We are putting one of them up for auction over on the Silver Forum. You can go and check the link out in the description to the auction page, and we'll be managing that auction for the next sort of week and a half when it ends weekend after next. And if you want an opportunity to buy these, then now is the time. The seller wants to put one up for auction just to see what happens. So go and check out the links in the description if you want to have a crack at winning the Era Britannia for 2023 with that 90-degree rotation of Queen's Head. I think it would be an interesting one. So that aside, now we get back to the video topic, keeping safe when buying secondhand silver. So my old adage of if it's too good to be true, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And that's, I think, a really good sort of life instinct to work by. The amount of times that I will see people looking for the best deals, and we all like a good deal, don't get me wrong, I want to pay as little as I can for the silver that I buy. But when that comes at the risk involved of buying something like stolen goods, or buying something that's maybe not being declared correctly when it's been imported to the United Kingdom, or perhaps it's not really genuine, or perhaps even the seller's brand new and you have no clue if you're ever going to get the goods, I don't understand why people take such risks just to save a couple of pounds an ounce, maybe, but a couple of pennies an ounce, it always staggers me, especially things like gold. But nevertheless, it happens, and there are people who can legitimately bring forward products which are cheaper than you would get them anywhere else, and that can be absolutely fine. But from a buyer's perspective of these things, I think you've got a responsibility to yourself to really just check that everything's okay. Now, simple logic would say that if somebody comes onto the market and is undercutting dealers for brand new products that they say that they've managed to import, and they're undercutting by 3, 4, 5 pounds an ounce sometimes, that might not be fully legit up to square. Now, there's obviously certain aspects that could be genuine. You could theoretically get somebody who's put a little advert out on Gumtree, or I think in America it's called Craigslist, and have said, I'll buy your silver at spot price. And somebody comes along and sells them a monster box for spot price. And then they turn around and they flip that for a 5% markup. That's perfectly legitimate, it's perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with that, and that could be happening. There could also be a simple case that the seller has made a mistake and he's making a loss, or perhaps he's just a generous soul and he wants to make a loss. But generally speaking, from my experience anyway, there are very few and far between sort of larger style trades that happen for spot price within third-party networks, because why would you send your stuff off to a randomer when you could get the exact same price from a dealer? And if you bought a monster box at some point, you're probably savvy enough to understand that you should be getting more than spot price for it. But, you know, things happen, it could happen. So from my perspective, when I see products listed vastly under dealers' prices for brand new stuff, my alarm bells always ring. And it is interesting to think about how myself as a buyer of precious metals in the past has acted. For example, this box of silver here that we've got, which is from a third party, and all of the other bits of third party silver we get in, we always ask for that provenance, that proof of ownership, that proof of purchase that somebody's actually bought this stuff in the past. Because, quite frankly, if somebody has stolen this lot of silver and sent it to somebody else to sell, then as the seller, you're going to be in a bit of trouble. Now, if you buy stolen goods in the UK unknowingly, usually, this is of course usually, there is no hard and fast about this, usually you won't get in sort of legal trouble. If you're just completely, innocent about this and it's fairly easy to prove, then you should be fine. But of course, you don't want to ever go down that route anyway. But worst case scenario is you get in legal trouble. But pretty much if it's proved to be stolen goods, and you can pretty easily trace things like proof coins with specific serial numbers, a bit harder for bullion, I'll grant you, but your goods aren't yours. The seller wasn't theirs to sell. So theoretically, the police can confiscate it and you can lose all your money. Theoretically, the seller is bound to refund you if they didn't know it was stolen. But again, how likely is that? If it's someone who's stealing goods, then there's a good chance they won't be above board enough to refund all their customers. So you're left with this awful situation of trying to get money back if something's happened. Now, look, that's rare, but it is not impossible. We hear and see stories of stolen coins and burglaries on various different social medias, and people putting alerts out with local dealers that things have been stolen. And if dealers come across X, Y, and Z, then they should be reporting it. Some people might not do that, or some people might not be aware. So it's always worth thinking about. It seems like it might not be a problem for most people, but actually it sometimes really can be. Now, the second part is the wrong declaration of products when they maybe are imported into places like the United Kingdom, where we have, some might say, draconian tax rules. I think that they are pretty draconian, but they are a fact of the world, and now we just have to get on with things. So in that situation, if you're completely unknowing and unwitting about the fact that maybe a seller has falsified import records or not declared things properly, then you're probably okay. But there's also a chance you might not be, in the similar vein to stolen goods. Anything can happen in this world. If the seller throws all of his buyers under the bus by going, "Oh, all these people told me to go and do it, so I can get, the sales and get them cheap silver." Theoretically, there's not an impossibility that you could be investigated for that conspiracy to import and things, and that's not good. And I have heard of various different social media platforms having groups that do this, and then they fall foul of the rules, and serious legal consequences happen. It is not impossible to happen, and it has happened in the past. So why would you again take the risk? There are these things, there are these alarm bells, and all of this brings me back to the price point of certain bits of silver that come up for sale. So if you see something that is super cheap, there's probably a reason for it. Most of the time, people don't make losses when they sell, things as a business. That's not how businesses work. Businesses are made to make money, aren't they? That's just how it goes. But what you do generally get is people making profit. And if somebody's obviously selling at a significant amount below where a profit margin would be, based on logic, based on your experience, then questions need to be asked. So what can you do? What questions can you ask these sellers? Well, you can ask for that provenance, that sort of chain. Where has it come from? What's the the details of its history? Now, some sellers might be like, well, I don't want to reveal my source, where I'm getting this from, because it's a competitive advantage. And yeah, I get that. And some sellers might not, and that's their choice. But ultimately, if somebody's completely above board with nothing to hide, then they might just explain, look, yeah, I bought it from a third-party customer at spot price, and I'm just turning it around and making a 10% margin. That's how it goes. And if they can somewhat, of course, anonymously prove that, then that's fine, that's great. But if they are really cagey about it, it's all about the communication, isn't it? If you get that bad sense from somebody, so think before you pull that trigger, I guess. Ask those questions, but, do it respectfully. Because not everybody's a scammer, not everybody's out there to fleece everyone and make money, or commit VAT fraud and import duty fraud. There are definitely legit sellers out there that have different ways of doing things that are legal. So always question them, but do it respectfully, and perhaps do it in private rather than calling them out on public platforms, and really get to grips with what's going on. I think that is a legitimate thing to do, and you can gauge the response and see how people act in that response to see whether or not it feels right. I think that is the only thing that you can do. Another thing, if they're selling and they're a business, you can start doing a bit of research on their business. You could look them up on Companies House if they're a limited company, or you could look them up if they say they're VAT registered. You can look them up on the VAT register to see all of their details and how they're how they're set up. So that's definitely something you can look into and try and research a little bit more in depth. If they're not a business and they're just a third-party seller, then I would personally always be asking for some provenance of the history of their proof of purchase. Now, from my perspective as a seller, so of course there's things to consider about GDPR and data protection, and making sure you don't, if I ask for proof of purchase on things that I sell, I don't just go and share that with every single person out there. But what I can say as a sort of trusted seller, as somebody who's got that I've got that social media presence. My job here is to be backyard bullion, inverted commas. Why would I risk everything over a few ounces of silver? It doesn't make sense to me to do that. But if somebody's not got any kind of social media presence, I think they need to be sort of really not defending themselves, but they need to be justifying some of the things that they're doing sometimes, but in such a way that isn't completely giving all the personal information of a particular other customer to everyone. I think I got a bit tangential on that. The nuts and bolts is here. If you're asked to provide that proof of sale, don't just give somebody else's random invoice to a randomer on the internet. You can have that due diligence in yourself to say, I've done the due diligence, I've got that here. It's all about the communication again. If somebody just comes out and goes, yeah, no, it's all fine, I've done my due diligence. Then question, well, what does that take form of? Oh, I've seen the invoices, they were bought in XYZ. You don't have to send the invoice to the customer. You can gauge things quite well on that. I think that protects you a little better, certainly. And then, I think the nuts and bolts of the story here is, if something is too good to be true, it might very well be too good to be true, and there could be ramifications further down the line to factor in. And I know from experience that and I can speak from experience here, that there are investigations that happen for people, and sellers of precious metals sometimes will be contacted by authorities to provide evidence of various different transactions. That does happen, and people always think, no, it'll never happen. Trust me, it does. And HMRC will be on it. They will be on it to make sure things are above board, especially now with post Brexit. There's a lot of incidental VAT and import duty fraud, and I think that there'll be some chickens coming home to roost for a lot of people who've been falling foul of importing the wrong things. And I have heard of things that have happened already that people have fallen foul of. So definitely worth doing things above board and not skipping. And that also applies to buying, not just the selling of it as well, because if you are deemed to be part of that conspiracy, or if it's deemed that you were innately involved, it could very well be something quite life-changing potentially into the future, and you don't want that to happen. So that is my thoughts and ramblings on keeping safe. There's always a time and a place for responsible selling and responsible buying, but always question. Get used to spotting what maybe isn't quite right. Get used to thinking about how to responsibly check as a buyer what you're buying is legitimate, legal, and real at the end of the day as well. I mean, there are a lot of people who will put posts up of things that don't have real photos, for example. I could talk on this subject for hours, I'm sure, but the nuts and bolts is here. Have a good think. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. So have a good question about it. Critically evaluate the situation. So that's my thoughts. Thank you one and all for watching, especially to my Rambling Society that listen to the back end of my videos. And one more little plug at the end here for the auction of the Mint Era Britannia for 2023. So the seller's got 22 of these. He's instructed me to put one up for auction. We're doing that on the Silver Forum. So there's a link down in the description box below to the Silver Forum, and you can go and see that, and you can place your bids on that platform. Not doing it on eBay because I feel that that's too much of a risky platform to put things like this on at this point, and the seller is happy for me to manage this auction and put it up for him on the Silver Forum. So that is where we are with it. If you're interested, then do let me know. Otherwise, that is it from me. To all my ramblers, you are super extra cool and super extra amazing for watching to minute 16 of my ramblings, and I do appreciate it. We have got a big old release this weekend. It's exciting. Something I've been working on for a long time. You may have seen a little teaser of it earlier this week with the little shorts video that I put out of my 1 gram bars. So definitely something not to miss if you are not subscribed. Otherwise, that's it from me. We'll see you on the next video. As always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.